Cecilia, shall we start? I think we have the audience ready now. So, Cecilia, first of all, welcome. And also I would like to welcome the audience to our digital session hosted by TÜSİAD. Today's topic is going to be Europe's Digital Vision 2030. And we have a very distinguished guest, Cecilia Bonafelt. She's the Director General of Digital Europe. And Digital Europe is the leading digital technology industry association representing over more than 35,000 digital companies in Europe. And Cecilia has an amazing background. She has experience in the ICT industry to start with, and she has a lot of several very important high-profile roles across Europe. And together with her today, we'll discuss about Europe's Digital Vision 2030 and also its implications for businesses and governments, and also especially for Turkey. So, Cecilia, again, welcome.
Thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure to speak with our Turkish friends, and so thank you so much, Uke, for actually inviting me for this interview or chat online.
Great, it's an honor and pleasure to have you here, Cecilia. So I'd like to start with a basic question. You are representing Digital Europe, so for the audience, can you explain us what is Digital Europe and what is its purpose?
Yes, so I mean, Digital Europe, I think it's not proven because I haven't looked all over the world, but I think we are definitely one of the world's biggest associations. We represent industry, so in total around 35,000 companies, spanning from the biggest global companies on digital, but actually also on health and manufacturing, where Turkey is very active with Arçelik and others. To, of course, thousands of SMEs, either within digital or within health, within manufacturing. I mean, right now we are growing rapidly. We've grown around 50% in the last 4 years. And one of the reasons, of course, is that all businesses are transforming, they're digitalizing, and all the digital policies that we represent. So what we do is that we are kind of you can say the sparring partner or the industry partner of the European Commission and the member states when they are designing digital policies and when they are designing digital investments in Europe. And of course, representing all our members. And right now, the whole industry is really digitalizing: manufacturing companies, health companies, transportation, energy. And this is why we, amongst others, represent digital across many sectors and across the board in Europe.
Thank you, Cecilia. You're now Director General of Digital Europe, but you also have a lot of other responsibilities. Can you also shed some light on what are your other current roles that is relevant for the digital transformation predominantly in Europe?
Yes, of course I can. Of course, my main responsibility is to serve our members. I also carry a role as advisor for the Secretary General of NATO in emerging technologies and security. And then I'm a part of the stakeholder group, which is designing the cybersecurity certifications for Europe within ESA. And then I have served 2 years in advising the Commission on how to design rules and governance for trustworthy artificial intelligence. And then, of course, I've just assumed a new role as a board member in GAIAX, which is the new association looking at how to create certifications or labeling, potentially standards for infrastructure for data spaces. There's a lot of data out there, and one of the roles of GAIAX is really to look at how can we leverage that data to the benefit of growth of SMEs and for the growth in society.
Thank you, Cecilia. I mean, you wear so many hats, so it's going to be really exciting to discuss the details of the Europe 2030 vision. But before going into the Europe vision, can you explain a little bit more about what are the top priority items on your agenda as Digital Europe at the moment?
Oh, there is many priorities. In fact, you can say that I think we are leading in the world as an area of coming up with new regulation and governance. And of course, that is That's a privilege. It means that we are a crucial factor of where the world is going. But it also means to be that we need to be super careful that we don't over-regulate. I mean, we cannot kill initiative. I mean, if we look at exciting developments, of course, the Commission and Ursula von der Leyen, a great leader, launched the Digital Decade strategy and the twin transition, which has two pillars. So the twin transition is green and digital. And she and the commissioners, of course, also walked the talk. They came out with a new investment plan and a new budget for EU investment, mirroring exactly those two pillars. So dedicated 20% of all recovery funds and of course of the budget towards digital, and 37% towards greening and the economy. And actually, those two, I can get back to that, they are extremely linked. We're not going to reach any target if we don't use digital to reach the green target. So it will be exciting to see how that actually plays off. Then, of course, we have other files, a safer internet, looking at how we can prevent terrorist content, illegal products. That regulation is called the DSA. We've been a big partner of the Commission in how to design that, and it's actually a quite good proposal on the table as it is now. We have the AI Act coming out. I think it will take longer, and I think it's healthy that it takes longer because again, there is a lot of regulation. Europe is very well regulated, and therefore we have to be careful there are not clashes with other regulations, and we need to make sure that we play catch up. We are far behind the other continents on investment in AI, so I would say that go first. And we are very privileged to have the GDPR that actually regulates many of the risks that could be on artificial intelligence. I could mention many more: cybersecurity, Data Act, DMA, but there's a lot going on.
Thank you, Cecilia. That's a good backdrop to the digital decade vision. So we'll go through the details of the vision and what are some concrete steps in it. But what was the motivation for announcing such a vision and having these concrete pillars? What is the EU trying to achieve with this initiative?
I think if I should look like at the big global picture, I think EU and Europe in general is a place where I should say we aim to do things very right. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, climate change it's such a big problem that sometimes it's too difficult for politicians to actually act on it, because will it actually get them the voters for next time, etc. But it is a problem that if it escalates, everybody will be in much more serious problems, wars, shortage of resources, many other things. And I admire the strategy that really takes the real problem of the world. This is a real problem, and if it escalates, it will create many other effects. So I think it aims to basically both do the right thing on the green agenda, to do the right thing on the digital agenda, make sure that we don't have half of our populations without the real skills to participate in the digital era, to make sure that we don't see new threats online hampering our citizens and these things. So I think it's really an attempt to do it right. But of course, it's also a wake-up call, especially on the digital agenda, that Europe is behind. I mean, we carry around, if you don't count UK, unfortunately we can't right now in the EU. If you don't count UK, we have around 5% of the world's unicorns, meaning fast-growing, scale-up companies. It means, looking at what we are, a very developed continent, this is a disaster, right? I mean, so it means that we lack competitiveness, we lack risk-willing capital, we lack competences, and we lack the scale. So I really think it was also a wake-up call that if you want to go digital and if you want to be competitive, you need the right people, you need the right skills, you need the right investment, and not least, you need to implement rules in the same way because you need the scale. And this has been one of the big challenges for EU, basically to do things the same way. So I think it was also a wake-up call to becoming more competitive, to really transform the continent into a real internal digital market, and to gain competitiveness and inclusion in society again.
Thank you, Cecilia. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing this as a wake-up call for Europe, and I completely agree with you. But I also very much value the honesty and doing the right thing focus of Europe. So I believe that the program starts with the right foot, I must say. Having said that, the program is very well structured with very concrete plan. It's not just a vision, because when you say vision, it might sound like it's something of a dream, but it has very, very crystal components. Can you shed some light about these 4 pillars that the program has and what it means for Europe?
Yes, so it has 4 pillars. So strategic reforms, really removing some of all these silly administrative barriers. You know, take my own country, I'm Danish, with 5 million people, there is no scale here, right? I mean, if we want to do something that is competitive, we are likely to be a small pilot, right? Pan-European projects, how can we foster investment and programs across Europe instead of having one in Denmark and one in Sweden and one in Germany, really looking at how we can work together at a bigger scale. Then it has really been followed up with, inclusion of KPIs. So how to measure the success, and also tools for accountability. So how can they follow up? It's the first time that we see the Commission saying, you will get the money, but we want to know your plans. We want to see where you invest, and we will follow up. It seems for businesses, this seems an unlikely thought that you would ever put money on something and just leave it like empty-handed of where it's going. So I think this is a very positive, not as necessarily only as a control, but really as the wake-up call that the world is global. We need scale, we need to collaborate, and we need to really create an internal market that works even better than it does now, much better than it does now. And we know that 8% of SMEs trade across one European border. And so it seems to be very good for larger companies, but we have some serious catching up to do, because there are too many costly barriers. Of course, we start with the language. We're hardly going to change that. But when we look at administrative barriers, different implementations of regulations, different, instead of having bigger projects across borders, small projects here and there. So there is a lot to do there. And I think this Commission took the first step. And I must say, I think they have done super well. Now we need to see, the proof is in the pudding. We need to see the implementation too. And of course, Digital Europe is playing also a major role. I mean, it's not only the Commission, it's not only the member states. We also have to remember, as businesses, what can we do? How can we make sure that we also start these cross-border projects, that we educate our employees, that we help schools to educate with digital skills? We have a lot to do also as companies in supporting this transition.
Great. Thank you, Cecilia. I'll go through the details of the vision with you, and then I will also tie all these discussions to the implications for Turkey towards the end of this discussion. In the meantime, if there are any questions from the audience, please feel free to use the chat function to relay those questions to us. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask you about the skills portion of this vision, because that's very interesting to me. And as part of the vision, there is a number target, which is 20 million ICT specialists. And when I look at that number, and I did some research, and roughly in Europe right now, close to 8 million IT specialists exist. And with the existing growth, by 2030, we might reach somewhere, a number somewhere in between 11 to 12 million people. This is huge, but also at the same time, with the target, there will be an 8 million gap. So when you come to think of this, what is the agenda, and what are some concrete plans that EU has in order to reach that 20 million ICT personnel target, which is a key, as you mentioned, also skills was an important component of this plan?
Yeah. So, I mean, we are actually, again, this is one area where Digital Europe plays a major role, right? A lot of programs are being launched right now. Amongst others, we are creating a digital skills and jobs platform for making available education and knowledge sharing on how to educate amongst the countries on digital skilling. I mean, we know that before the COVID crisis, 52% of the workforce in Europe needed to be reskilled due to digitalization. This is huge. Another thing we know is that basically only 1% of the women are actually ICT competent specialists, where it's 6% from men. So we are using only half of the population and too little of the population on an area that is pervasive. I mean, ask your family, when did they not use technology in a full day? It's impossible. I mean, and what is technology? Today, technology is self-driving cars, it is windmills, it is the lighting in your house, it's whether you are going to be working with a manufacturing company, whether you're going to be a nurse, whether you're going to be a school teacher. And somehow across, it's like the technology can basically do everything now. And there is nothing that we say like, we can't do that, right? But we only have a very, very, very limited proportion of the population that are able to basically create it and use it for the benefits in their specific sectors. And I must say, I'm not. It should be the job of policymakers to make sure that their citizens are stepping into the future with the right skills to participate in society. And I think we lost, a lot of years by the decentralized structure of the educational system, not only in Europe, but also in US and many other places in the world, because decision has been like decentralized, there's not been a focus, it has not been a push. But I really, to me, if I was setting the target for Europe, I would say by 2030, we should have in all school classes and secondary school, mandatory coding classes and computer thinking. It is really something that even though you don't turn out as being really a specialist, you need to be offered the option of speaking or at least understanding to a minimal the only global universal language there is in the world, which is coding and digital computer thinking. So I would set an even more aggressive target. I think there's a lot to do. Policymakers and EU are talking, but there is still a long way. And remember, of course, industry again. We have a major role to play to basically support the schools to get the right skills to teach the children, but also to reskill our own workers.
Thank you, Cecilia. It's very important also the STEM inclusion and diversity. I must say it's almost sounding like a male-dominant industry all across the world, and inclusion of women in technology roles and education is going to be much more important going forward, even with the numbers themselves are proving so. As far as also, there were some mentions about the strengthening of the Erasmus program for third world countries outside of the EU, and also more collaboration with Africa. And I personally believe that there will be some implications for countries like Turkey as well, and it will have implications. So it's very important that we closely follow. I just want to ask you, what are some implications, for example, for countries like Turkey on the skills development?
I mean, in many of the programs that are being launched, they are actually open to Turkey, right? And I think that Turkey has also always been leaning in and really wanted to collaborate on these. Many of these programs, most of these programs, I would say, are open to collaboration with Turkey. And I think it's super important that we stay very, very close and that we make sure that we have the same development. I think Turkey has, I remember I visited Turkey 3 years ago, and I remember that one of the facts is that you are actually doing a little bit better than continental Europe on digital skills and STEM skills, which is good for you, very good for you. But of course, we should never rest on our laurels. We should always be on top of this and make sure that we go forward, both Turkey and EU, that we collaborate on these programs and these processes. And I don't know if Turkey has set, targets, but lean in and please do so. For us, you are a very important part of Europe. And if we get even more mobility than we have now, it will be great to basically see much more collaboration across border.
Thank you, Cecilia. I think it's the message very clear that we need to keep an eye on the developments and make sure that Turkey is also following the developments there and benefit as much as it can be. I know from my company and also a lot of other companies, there is a lot of integration with the Horizon projects, for example, but there is more to come, I must say, in the coming years.
I know that you have some of the world's most advanced factories in manufacturing, right? So maybe and you are a very important part of our manufacturing executive council also, right? So you are already, but of course you are probably one who's best in class. This needs to go broader. We need to make sure that this also comes to SMEs and it comes to other sectors in Turkey.
Exactly, Cecilia. Thank you very much for the kind words. It's actually, and there are some other also TÜSİAD members who are really keen on digital transformation. TÜSİAD has an SD Square program for the industrial digital transformation to accelerate the digital transformation of its members and also their suppliers and their supplier network. But having said that, in the Vision 2030, there is a great focus on the SMEs. I remember discussing with some G2 representatives about the digital transformation a couple of years ago. I forgot who said it, but there was a comment saying like, big companies will take care of themselves anyway. So it's very important that Europe should focus on the SMEs and make sure that the SMEs will digitally transform, which is also the case for Turkey as well. So when I look at the program, there is specific focus on SMEs. Can you shed some light on what is being planned for the SMEs and what is expected?
I mean, what is expected and what is planned is basically to get 2 indicators up. So one being how many of the SMEs that are actually using data actively in their business models. Many SMEs have not realized that data is a source of differentiation, competitiveness, and I think it's around 12% today, and we have set a target of 25. I mean, it is really, we need to up the game, and I don't think that's even enough. We need to make sure that we have mostly most of the SMEs understanding data, and also that they use, cloud solution, online trade, many of these things. I mean, it was shown during the COVID crisis that the companies that are digitally enabled and digital savvies, they are much more robust. And the survival rate of these companies was much higher than the non-digital SMEs. So a lot of programs on enabling data spaces. Of course, one of the problems for SMEs is how do you get the data? We are running this Unicorn Award, and thank you for the Turkish nominations. We have 2 of them this year. So we are basically trying to find those great innovative tech scale-ups in digital Europe and let them kind of compete against each other, and we have 3 winners each year. And what we see there, I mean, if you ask them, we just surveyed them last year, and we asked them, what is the biggest barrier of growth? They all mentioned 2. They say, we cannot get hold of the data. So the ones who actually have digital business models, they struggle to find the data. Let me give you an example. Radiobotics. They are doing basically, they are using AI on scanning pictures on cancer, and they can basically predict with 99.999 at a very, very, very early stage that this will develop to cancer. But how do you get hold of all the pictures without breaking laws? Then, okay, you can get in Denmark, but how do you make sure you have pictures of other nationalities, from Turkey, from France, from other countries? So big problem. One of the ways to get around that is the focus on the data spaces. To build data spaces where companies can access data, SMEs can access data on equal terms with the bigger companies that has much more resources to handle GDPR and cybersecurity and networks. So this is definitely a very, very important component. Then the other one is, of course, for them to start using cloud solutions, online sales, and there is also a lot of programs of aiming for them basically to be much more digitally enabled. And then, of course, there are these programs where you can do an Erasmus either scholarship, or you can have people working within your company that to learn how to work with digital. And it's very important that they get these digital savvies into their companies to learn from what are the options in a business like mine.
Thank you, Cecilia. You mentioned data, and data is hard to get, especially for SMEs, as you mentioned. And with programs like GAIAX and others, Europe is also trying to standardize and also provide access to such platforms for SMEs as well. But all of them are now under this sustainable and secure digital infrastructures framework. And there is cloud and data, there's cheap 5G, gigabit Ethernet for everyone. There are some really high investment topics, I must say. So what is EU's agenda there?
I mean, we argued way back in, and you know that because you were a part of defining all these targets. We came out in 2019 with 21 KPIs, basically saying this is what a digital Europe looks like, and we should set the concrete targets. We got what we wanted. Now we have concrete targets from the Commission. One of the things is on infrastructure. What is a little bit strange is that we actually have some of the world's best connectivity companies headquartered in Europe, but we don't have much investment in infrastructure. So it means that we have huge differences. If you go to Germany during COVID on the countryside, you wouldn't be able to study. If you were in Denmark, you had no problem, right? So we still have large differences. And when you transfer that, it's of course a social problem that you have rural areas that are excluded from what is going on in the world and cannot go to school if there is a crisis. Second of all, if you transfer that challenge to companies, okay, to basically use large amount of data and process them, what do you need? You need a network. You need fast connections. So how do we actually invest heavily in infrastructure, in 5G, potentially even in 6G development of the future, to basically, one, get all citizens the same right to be connected? I mean, why are we building roads? We would not say, I'm not building any roads. You have to crawl down the mountain, right? I mean, we build roads. We need to make sure that they are also included into the digital society.
Great analogy, by the way.
So here with the companies also, how do we make sure that we do not only centralize all growth in small islands in the society, but that we actually have a uniform access to high speed connectivity for companies across Europe. So this is one of the major targets, really, to invest in an infrastructure that boosts the growth.
Thank you, Cecilia. For the interest of the audience, also, you're participating in GAIAX. Can you shed some light about what is GAIAX and what is being targeted with that as part of this?
Yeah, so GAIAX is, you could say, it's a private, it's an organization of companies can become members and organizations can become members, and there the target is basically to develop some standardized some standards for data sets, some standards for infrastructure, some certifications and labels that can be applied that make sure that whatever is built is in compliance with the European regulations, but also with a lot of security things. So depending on the level of security that you need, you can basically choose different certification levels to make sure that you contain data in a safe way, that you handle data in a safe way, and that you have an infrastructure to basically host data in a safe way. This is super simplified, and then of course we'll have to see if GAIAX also will be the motor of some of the data spaces itself. I do think there is still some of the data spaces that needs to be handled somehow by public sector themselves, defense, security, health, other things. But we have to see where, and there's where the EU has just started what is called the Cloud Alliance. So we have to see where the clear cut is actually will take place. I think for Turkey, I mean, it's a golden opportunity also to look at what do we do with data spaces? Are we actually going to apply the same label certification standards as Europe on this data-driven economy? And of course, I would say it would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense. Like, for example, also we discussed a bit earlier, right? I mean, data adequacy meaning that you have a documentation of implementation of GDPR in a way that EU says, yes, we consider you equally protective towards your citizens and equally protective towards data as Europe. And this is a major step forward. I mean, I know we don't have data adequacy with Turkey yet, but I think it should be one of our targets for the future, basically to make sure. I mean, if we look at we just did an analysis on data flow and data flow disruptions. Let's just say that today the world stand at a hold of a disruption of data flows. I mean, Europe will stand to lose around 2 trillion night over, right? So it is really, and the manufacturing sector would suffer the most. So data and data flows and data protection is at the core of collaboration in the future, but of course also of growth of companies.
Thank you, Siska. I think it's going to be a very important subject also as part of GDPR and other compliance. And I know that it's in the agenda of the policymakers in Turkey as well. And also for most business reasons, for most business people doing business with Europe, both in terms of import and export, it's very critical. So the more Turkey is aligned with EU on this front, the better it is. In terms of the trade and in terms of the business collaboration. Having said that, as part of this infrastructure, also one thing that caught my attention is the European Chips Act. Because when you say digital transformation, nowadays we no longer talk about hardware, but this was unique. So what's the rationale behind this European Chips Act and what is being achieved? Is it for protective reasons or is it self-sufficiency?
Yeah, I mean, all this self-sufficiency and strategic autonomy, I think it's a little bit it's a little bit unrealistic in many senses, right? And today we have a global supply chain, but what happened over the COVID crisis is, of course, that there was a huge shortage, and that we woke up to a world where all the chips was more or less, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, produced in one country or in one part of the world, and there we woke up to, oh God, there is microchips in PCs, in dishwashers, in cars, in what you have anything that moves or can make light, right? It basically has microchips, and Europe had been investing a lot of money in innovation on microchips, but in the end, all the production was somewhere else. So we have gone from, I think, 24% of microchip production in Europe to only 8%. And the car manufacturing industry and many others really saw a huge shortage, and we're unable to supply their clients with microchips. I think it's an attempt to look at what are the microchips where we need to have a decent supply in Europe also, or even with our major trading partners, to make sure that the society can actually run in times of crisis. Again, some kind of a wake-up call, right? It's amazing that we have to get a pandemic to wake up to the fact that the world has changed. But I don't think it's unsustainable to basically say we'll do this all on our own. So I think this is This is about looking for the right collaboration partners and to get a decent geographical spread of production that makes the world and Europe more resilient. Again, and then of course there's large discussions, should it be the bigger chips or the smaller chips? I would say both of the above, right? Because we will still have many of the industries running on the bigger chips for a long time, but of course we also need to prepare for the future and know that we have also resilience within the smaller chips.
Thank you. So as far as I understand, Europe is very serious about this, but also needs to partner in order to achieve its goal as well. I think US is also on the same boat, where we see huge investments now in US territory for fab manufacturing as well. Yeah. It's going to be a very interesting race to watch, especially also given the Taiwan's political situation in the near future. So having said that, I would like to now discuss a little bit about the implications for the governments as well. As part of the Vision 2030, also there are a lot of to-dos for the government. So what is expected in terms of the government transformation and also their digital services?
I mean, for sure, if you look at, for example, the EID, it sounds like something trivial, right? So EID, okay, do we really need that? But to transform a public sector, you need to make sure that you have some kind of EID for citizens. It will be the base of all the services that you want to provide, of your e-health services, of your medical records, so there is a big job to do in EID, and very, very few actually has an EID in Europe still. There are actually standards in place that makes them interoperable, so they can do it in a little bit a different way, but there are standards in place that makes that guides how to do this. Then, of course, if we look at the government services, there is a big difference in the society. You can take the Nordics. We don't have to open our mailbox, physical mailbox anymore. Everything is digital. We have digital ID, digital records. But if you go to other countries, there are huge differences. People cannot access to their data. They need to get written appointments with letters and many other things. So basically, and I think this is the responsibility of the EU and of the public sector is to fix themselves, right? To make sure that we have public services in key areas, amongst others in health, but also, for example, access to knowledge on regulations, access to e-government services in general. And this is definitely one of the big investment areas. What is important now is, again, pan-European projects. Do we actually need to waste money doing it in 27 different ways, or can they actually agree on cross-country projects of improvement and really get interoperable solutions in place already? I will definitely hope so.
Cecilia, this is also an area very important in Turkey as well, and Turkey has been investing a lot in the e-government services. But I'm pretty sure that over this decade, there will be a lot of cross projects. Hopefully, that we can learn from Europe. Europe, maybe we can contribute to Europe as well. Having said that, I want to pick up on that previous discussion about the Europe not doing this alone in some of these transformations, especially as you mentioned on the chip side. And there was a very interesting development that I realized in September. I didn't know this meeting before it happened, so it came to me as a surprise. But Europe and United States held their first technology council meeting in September.
Yes.
So what is the rationale and what was the goal of that meeting, and what should we expect going forward between that relationship between EU and US on technology?
I mean, it seems like something that we should have done all the time, right? So for example, with Japan, EU has had a great process aligning on data adequacy, discussing how to do trustworthy data flows, discussing trustworthy AI, trustworthy data, and so on. Looking at standards for digital in general. But of course, we had some years with a bit different how can you say, approach to collaboration in the US. So there has been like a slip in time where everything has kind of gone a little bit quiet. But of course now with the EU, you can say in many ways EU are okay. They are seeing a way, and they need to wake up on competitiveness. We have a lot of catching up to do. But if you look at regulations, we are the most advanced continent in the world. So how do you handle that with some of your major trading partners? How do you make sure that you have a common understanding on what is cybersecurity, that you have a common understanding of what is AI when you speak risk? What is a safe internet? You know, how do we make sure that we get down terrorist content, but that we don't hamper freedom of speech, for example? So these type of issues, and we had the privilege. So Biden came to Brussels in June. He brought, amongst others, Secretary of Commerce Raimondo, and we had an informal roundtable, the honor of hosting her and Vestager, who are two of the most leading kind of pushing forward the CTC. And they asked us, you know, could you actually advise us on what are the things that we should be discussing now? And we came up with 10 points. We see that 9 of them mirrored directly down to the priorities of this group. And I would say the meeting, there was a few diplomatic hiccups just before the meeting between US and EU, specifically France. But I think everything is settled now. And I must say the meeting was a great success. There was a willingness on both sides really to engage, and a deep understanding that the digital era, you cannot limit and not collaborate. There is a need to basically harmonize, or at least align approaches towards new regulation and towards new governance. Because if we just take an example, you have global, big, large tech company, and they have to implement GDPR. Do they do that only in Europe? No, they don't. They implement it into their processes, right? It's very costly, so they can do it. It's not a problem. But imagine if you have an SME, let's say just 1,000 employees working in 2 different continents, 10 different countries, and all of them came up with their own privacy definitions, and all of them came up with their own cybersecurity definitions. That would basically stop companies from going abroad because it's too expensive. And of course, also security-wise, I mean, there's a lot of risks that can be discussed here. So basically, the topics now on the agenda is cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, green technologies, not least green. Let's not forget green. Common targets on green. We saw just US leaning in again in the COP26, committing again to the climate goals. Semiconductor shortage, compliance with standards. So standards to safer internet, export controls, digital skills and inclusion. And it's really, it's quite across the board, both looking at tech and the society, and then on specific things that are crucial for security and for the economy, amongst other cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. So I expect, I mean, we will come out with our own paper where we, from an industry view, will come up and say, these are the targets we think are realistic to meet in 6 months, in 12 months, and longer term. So we're working at that at the moment. And then, of course, I mean, it is also up to the leaders, so Blinken and Vestager, Dombrovskis, Raimondo, and Tai, who are the 5 chairs, to come up with what do they want to work on. I mean, what do they believe they can find consensus on in the coming period. I think the next meeting will be during the French presidency, either in Brussels or in France. And I'm planning to go actually to the States also in Q1 next year. Travels allowed and everything. But I think it's a great progress. I mean, we are both democratic units and have many values in common. But of course, there are also differences of regimes, as we have seen, for example, on data protections and government access to data. So there are some of the areas that are no quick fixes. But we need to start now, and we need to basically work against that alignment long term.
I mean, we see more and more examples of this alignment recently. Also, this 15% tax issue, etc., across the board, and also now that it's COP time, for 2 weeks were more optimistic than I anticipated. So I'm hopeful that there will be more collaboration. But I also want to now tie this discussion to the what you said, the twin projects. Now, how does this digital vision supports the sustainability and climate action vision? What is the deliverable from the digital vision that the EU has?
Thank you so much for asking me that question. No, because it's actually something that I think if you're not a digital savvy like me, it's hard to understand. But you know, the right questions to ask ourselves is, how do I bring down CO2 emissions from manufacturing? I mean, there is a lot of materials, but this is all about technology. How do I measure my use of water? How do I measure my use of electricity? How do I find out where the big bumps in energy use are? It's all about artificial intelligence. It's all about data. It's all about having the bandwidth to actually process all these. So what we did was basically, we've actually just published, and you'll find it on our front page on the website, published a piece of thought leadership saying there is no climate action without digital action. Yeah. And what do we mean by that? Basically, we have taken 22 super cool cases where digital has basically transformed and brought down CO2 drastically within with everything from the city of Vienna with a reduction of 71%, where, for example, Siemens combination of data analytics and energy saving technologies, also called a digital twin, has been used basically to monitor and bring down CO2 emissions. So there, I urge you, if you have, the sun is coming now, as you can see, I'll move a little bit to the right. So if you go to our website and download this, you'll see that we are really trying to make it very concrete for governments to understand, you know, what kind of investments do they actually need to do, and not only do, but also to enhance, to make sure that they are incentives to invest in these technologies, basically to drive also this combination of digital into the climate agenda.
I really like how you summarize this. There is no Green Deal without digital. I'm also in full agreement with that, because what we try to achieve with all these targets is, at the end of the day, going to help the green agenda as well. Having said that, Cecilia, just one question about the overall program. Majority of the actions that you mentioned will require an enormous budget to achieve that. So what is the plan around making the funds or investments possible for such a big transformation?
I mean, first of all, I mean, public funding is public funding. We shouldn't misuse public funding, is my view, right? I mean, right now, even for example, in investment, we know that only 0.5% of the investment goes into SMEs and scale-ups in Europe, right? Where if you look at the US, I think it's almost 3%, and in China it's 1.4%. So it is really also about fostering a business climate that enhances and increases the private sector investment. Of course, then there are also government actions that can help, like tax incentives and in general political incentives to invest in certain things. So, I mean, there's a lot of money on this. As I said, there's 37% of the recovery fund is dedicated towards green, and I predict that a lot of it will be used for digital. So there is money behind that promise. We will never be able to play catch up with the biggest investors, and neither should we. We are an open economy driven by an open liberal market, not by a planned economy. So, but there are money behind accelerating certain investments in the society right now.
Thank you, Cecilia. One final question from me, and then I'll ask the audience if they have any other questions for you while you're here. So we discussed that there is so much on the agenda and so much is planned. So how do you think Turkey and countries like Turkey will be affected? What are some of the risks and opportunities that you see for Turkey in this transition?
Of course, the risk is the same as the opportunity, right? It's just with reverse sign. I think let's take it as a positive mind. I think there's a huge opportunity for Turkey to lean in, to be one of the partners with whom we align. Data protection, as we discussed, to set some ambition target, basically maybe to create the same visions for Turkey, but really align with the development of EU. I mean, it is a huge market, and also for Turkey, it's a huge market, and to basically be a part of the same transformation. And as I said before, you are definitely not worst in class. I now know that you have quite a lot of STEM skills, and that you have some very leading companies within the sector. So really to lean in and to be a part of those dialogue, take a dialogue on what are the targets that you want to reach, where do you want to align on the governance, and what will be the most important areas of alignment, right? To obtain compliance with the EU rules.
Thank you, Cecilia. As EU is the biggest trade partner of Turkey, it's imperative that we are aligned on these key initiatives as well. And also, as far as I understand, it's going to be much more important going forward. If we see the further alignment and harmonization across EU and US, it's going to be more important also for relations with US as well. Therefore, we need to keep an eye on it, both in terms of our policies and also our business systems. Having said that, I want to turn to the audience. If there are any questions that we'd like to ask to Cecilia, we have 4 minutes left. If there are any questions, you can use the chat function of Zoom to ask your questions.
They're all quiet. Let me see.
There's one question, Cecilia. I'll read it out for you. What's your plan to increase the number of people who can create these technologies other than importing them from outside of Europe? I think this goes back to our skills discussion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, exactly. I mean, as I usually say, I mean, if we turn into a continent of users and not creators, I mean, what are we, right? It's very important, and I don't see this I don't see this sovereignty, autonomy thing. What I do see is that we need to have a a balance in the creation of technologies. We cannot have, okay, there is only one place in the world, they do all the technologies and the rest of us is just using it. We need to basically make sure that we have this digital process across the board, and Europe is now really stepping up and doing this, which is super positive. So we should definitely be creators and not only users.
Thank you, Cecilia. I'm waiting for if there are any other questions. In the meantime, I'm going to post the European Commission's webpage about Europe's digital decade, digital targets for 2030, where the participants can go there and explore what is under the hood in more detail. I'll write it to our chat on Zoom. And in the meantime, if there are any questions, please post it to Q&A on Zoom, not the chat. I accidentally said chat. And also I'm going to share the Digital Europe page where you mentioned about the case examples for the digital transformation enabling climate action.
Very good. And then I will share with all of you our KPI scoreboard. So we basically have a full web page where you can look at health, you can look at skills, you can look at connectivity, where the industry, where we have been also saying, this is how we should measure ourselves. This is the indicators that we want, where we want to measure ourselves on all these factors, on skills, on inclusion, on digital trade, etc., etc. So I hope that you learned something, even though you don't have a lot of questions for me. I hope that you learned something on the way.
There's
one
one
more.
One more question, and then I think we can call it. So Fatih is asking, how do you comment on TÜSİAD members, member companies joining Digital Europe?
You'd be welcome.
So you're encouraging it.
I definitely, of course.
Great. Thank you, Cecilia. I really enjoyed the discussion. It's always a pleasure to discuss with you on the digital transformation vision of Europe. There are hardly anyone that I know that is more knowledgeable than you do and that is able to keep the pulse and keep it honest, I must say. So thank you very much for your participation today. And I look forward to our next event down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.